He was the most powerful man on earth. His armies had destroyed Jerusalem, subjugated Egypt, and swept entire nations away like dust in the wind. His name made the greatest empires of the ancient world tremble: Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, absolute ruler of the greatest kingdom ever built upon the face of the earth. But one afternoon of apparent glory, as he gazed upon his golden city, something was taken from him, suddenly and terrifyingly. Nights before, the king had woken drenched in cold sweat. A disturbing dream had visited him, a vision so vivid and charged with meaning that even Babylon's most experienced sorcerers fell silent upon hearing it. An enormous tree grew at the center of the earth. Its roots plunged deep into the ground, its branches touched the very skies. All of humanity fed upon its abundant fruit. Then, without warning, a heavenly being descended from above. Cut down the tree. Tear off its branches. The celestial voice thundered through the dream like lightning. Scatter the animals sheltering beneath it. But leave the stump with its roots in the ground, bound with chains of iron and bronze. Let it be soaked in the dew of heaven, let its portion be with the beasts of the field. Let 7 times pass over it. The vision ended. And the most powerful man on earth could not stop trembling. Daniel was summoned to the palace. He listened carefully and fell into a long silence, a silence that flooded the throne room with dread. The prophet's face had visibly changed. The king noticed and felt his stomach drop. "Daniel, do not let this trouble you," said the man who had raised Jerusalem, his voice carrying a rare vulnerability no one had ever seen before. And Daniel, drawing the courage that only comes from fearing God more than the most powerful king on earth, took a breath and spoke. "To understand the magnitude of this judgment, you first need to see Babylon as it truly was, the most magnificent city the ancient world had ever produced. Double walls so wide that chariots raced atop them, the Euphrates River cutting the city in half, golden temples gleaming under the Mesopotamian sun. The famous Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, flourished at the heart of the royal palace. It was the capital of the world. And Nebuchadnezzar was its absolute master. He had risen to the throne around 605 BC, still young, his veins burning with the fire of conquest. But it was Nebuchadnezzar who turned Babylon into a superpower. At the Battle of Carchemish, he crushed the mighty Egyptian army and wiped out the last remnants of the Assyrian Empire. Within 2 years on the throne, he controlled the entire Fertile Crescent. Kings knelt before him. Nations paid tribute without resistance. The world trembled whenever his name was spoken. In 597 BC, his armies marched on Jerusalem. The Jewish king surrendered without a fight. Nebuchadnezzar carried off the treasures of Solomon's temple and deported 10,000 of Israel's finest citizens. But when Jerusalem rebelled again, in 586 BC, he returned with merciless fury. He leveled the holy city to its foundations. He set fire to the temple, the most sacred place on earth for the people of Israel. Then he chained the survivors and dragged them, bleeding, across the desert to Babylon. Among the captives marched to Babylon was a young Jewish nobleman named Daniel. Intelligent, courageous, faithful to his God even in a foreign land. Nebuchadnezzar had ordered that the finest young captives be educated in the Babylonian court, to master the language, the literature, the wisdom of the kingdom. It was an assimilation strategy. But what the king could not foresee was that this young prisoner would become the very instrument through which God would speak directly to his hardened soul. Babylon was not merely a political power, it was a spiritual center loaded with centuries of history. Its legendary Tower of Babel had once reached for the very heavens, a direct act of defiance against divine sovereignty that God himself had interrupted. The Temple of Marduk, Babylon's supreme deity, dominated the skyline with its colorful tiers. This was a city that believed its gods were the strongest, and that Nebuchadnezzar, its king, was the living manifestation of divine power on earth. But God had already spoken to Nebuchadnezzar before this crisis. In the 2nd year of his reign, a dream woke him in a panic, and he could not remember it. He demanded that his sorcerers reveal both the dream and its meaning, under penalty of death. Impossible. Only Daniel, after praying through the night, received the revelation, a colossal statue of different metals, destroyed by a stone not cut by human hands. The stone represented God's kingdom. Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, yet unchanged. Some years later came an even more spectacular test. The king ordered a golden statue 90 feet tall to be erected and commanded that everyone bow before it. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused. Enraged, he had the furnace heated 7 times hotter than normal, then threw all 3 men inside. But when he looked through the openings, he saw 4 figures walking in the flames, completely unharmed. The 4th one, he said, looked like the Son of God. The 3 men walked out without a single mark, not a hair singed, not even the smell of smoke on their clothes. Nebuchadnezzar declared that the God of the Hebrews was powerful, but this was not conversion. It was admiration. Like a man who witnesses a wonder and then returns to the same road. The same king who had seen God act supernaturally twice still harbored deep in his heart the most dangerous conviction of all, that he himself was the center of the universe. Over the years, Nebuchadnezzar's pride grew like the tree in his dream, tall, spreading in every direction. He expanded Babylon on a scale unmatched in history, building palaces, reconstructing temples, opening irrigation canals, paving streets with polished stone. The processional way, with its deep blue glazed bricks and golden lions in relief, was one of the most breathtaking sights of the ancient world. Every stone whispered in silence, all of this was built by my own greatness. Archaeologists excavating Babylon found something extraordinary, bricks throughout the city stamped with Nebuchadnezzar's personal name. Literally thousands of bricks bearing his mark. For him, Babylon was not just a capital, it was his eternal monument. But there was a law he had forgotten: no human power lasts forever. There was a king above all kings, whose name never needed to be stamped on any brick because it was written into the very foundations of the universe. It was within this climate of absolute grandeur that the second great dream arrived. Nebuchadnezzar was in his palace, at the peak of his power, when a vision disturbed him more than anything else in his entire life. A tree. But not just any tree, the tallest, most beautiful, most powerful one in existence. Its roots reached into the very heart of the earth. Its branches stretched up to the skies. Every living creature fed from it, sheltered beneath it, found rest in its generous shade. The vision was one of absolute splendor, universal power expressed in living form. Every detail was magnificent: heavy fruit, dense foliage, animals at peace beneath its branches. It was an image of endless providence and abundance. Then, descending from the sky came a being the biblical texts call a watcher, a heavenly entity of terrible authority. His voice rang like thunder over the silence of the dream: cut down the tree. Tear off its branches. Let it fall. Drive away the animals sheltered beneath it and scatter the birds from its branches. But leave the stump with its roots in the ground, bound with chains of iron and bronze, in the grass of the field. Let it be drenched in the dew of heaven, let its portion be with the beasts of the earth. Let 7 times pass over it, until he acknowledges that the Most High rules over the kingdom of men and gives it to whoever he wishes. The decree had been spoken. And no power on earth could reverse it. Daniel was summoned to the throne room. He listened carefully and fell into a long silence, a silence that filled the hall with mounting tension. The prophet's face had visibly changed. The king felt his stomach tighten. "Daniel, do not let this alarm you," he said, his voice carrying a rare vulnerability. And Daniel, gathering all the courage that only comes from fearing God above the most powerful king on earth, drew a breath and spoke the words that no one else in that room would dare say. "My lord the king, may this dream apply to your enemies and its meaning to your adversaries. The tree you saw, that grew so tall and strong, that reached to the sky and was visible to all the earth, that tree is you, O king. You have grown great and powerful. Your greatness has reached to the heavens. Your dominion extends to the ends of the earth. The chopping down of the tree and the stripping of its branches means you will be driven from men. Your dwelling will be with the beasts of the field. You will eat grass like cattle. You will be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times will pass over you, until you acknowledge that the Most High rules over the kingdom of men and gives it to whoever he wishes. The preserved stump means your kingdom will be restored, when you finally bow. Therefore, O king, Daniel looked directly into the monarch's eyes, accept my counsel, turn from your sins by practicing righteousness, and from your wickedness by showing mercy to the oppressed. Perhaps God will spare you. For 12 long months, nothing happened. God had given Nebuchadnezzar a period of grace, time enough for repentance, for change, for the hardest heart in the world to discover humility. But instead of reflection, the king plunged even deeper into his sense of grandeur. Every day without punishment was, to him, proof there was nothing to fear. The silence of God was interpreted as the absence of God. And it was the most expensive mistake of his life. One day, 12 months after the dream, Nebuchadnezzar was walking on the terraces of his palace. The city spread beneath his feet, towers, temples, canals, gardens, and walls gilded by the afternoon sun. It was a breathtaking sight. And then, gazing upon everything he had built, the king opened his mouth and spoke the words that sealed his fate forever. Is this not great Babylon, which I myself have built as a royal residence by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty? The words were still on his lips when a voice descended from heaven. There was no thunder, no earthquake, only a voice, clear and absolute, slicing through the golden afternoon air like an invisible blade. O King Nebuchadnezzar, this is decreed for you, your royal authority has been taken from you. You will be driven from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like cattle. 7 times will pass over you, until you acknowledge that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men. There was no room for negotiation. The voice had spoken. And before the stunned eyes of his advisors, something deeply unsettling began happening to Nebuchadnezzar. The recognizable light of reason began fading from his eyes like a torch slowly going out. The man who had dictated laws to nations, who had made decisions that changed the course of history, that man began to disappear. And in his place, something strange and terrifying emerged from within the most feared king in the world. Modern science has a name for what happened: clinical lycanthropy, a rare psychotic disorder in which a patient genuinely believes they are an animal. But for those who witnessed it that day in the palace of Babylon, no diagnosis could explain what they saw. The king of Babylon, the most feared, most intelligent, most powerful man of his generation, was behaving like a beast. The human focus drained from his eyes. His movements changed. And then he walked out of the palace. Picture that scene: the conqueror who had brought down the walls of Jerusalem, who had received tribute from kings prostrated at his feet, who had slept on beds covered in gold, now walked with unsteady steps out of the palace and into the open field. Did the guards follow? Did they try to bring him back? The Bible does not say. It only records what happened. The king went out to the field. And he began to eat grass. And the body began to change. Daniel's text describes it with unsettling precision: his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle, and his nails like the claws of a bird. A slow, progressive, visible transformation. Weeks became months. The man who had ordered his name stamped on every brick in Babylon now slept on wet grass, exposed to the night dew. Rain fell on him. Morning sun woke him. And he no longer knew who he had once been. The prophecy was fulfilling itself with terrifying accuracy. Meanwhile, in Babylon, the throne stood empty. What happens to the greatest empire on earth when its king goes mad? Historical records suggest that Nebuchadnezzar's son, Evil Merodach, may have served as regent during this period. But the court knew what had happened. And there was the prophecy, the one Daniel had spoken aloud in the throne room, before everyone: the stump would remain. The roots would endure. The king would return, when he finally bowed his knee. 7 years. 7 long years beneath the open sky, in the field, without a crown, without a name, without reason. For a man who had slept in palaces and woken with the world at his feet, this was an eternity of absolute humiliation. But God had not destroyed Nebuchadnezzar, he had allowed him to descend to the very bottom of himself. To lose everything that defined him as human, to discover what lay beneath all that greatness, a creature. Not a creator. A being made, not the master of the universe. Winter passed over him. Then spring. Then summer. Then winter again, 7 complete cycles. The land around him bloomed and withered and bloomed again, and he was present through every season without understanding anything. But somewhere deep inside, in a place the madness had not entirely reached, the spirit of Nebuchadnezzar waited. Like an ember buried under ash, alive, but nearly extinguished. And then came the moment described in Daniel 4 verse 34 with the most devastating simplicity in all of Scripture. At the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes toward heaven. Here is the most dramatic turning point in the entire story. It was not an earthquake that restored him. Not a visible angel descending with water. It was a simple gesture, lifting his eyes. After 7 years staring at the ground like an animal, soaked in dew, covered in grass, forgotten to himself, the king raised his face toward the sky. And in that very instant, his sanity returned. Then I praised the Most High, I honored and glorified him who lives forever. This was not the voice of a king reclaiming his throne. It was the voice of a man who had witnessed the truth of his own smallness, and found in that truth not destruction, but freedom. His reason returned. His memory returned. And with them came something the Nebuchadnezzar of his glory days had never truly possessed, the awareness that there was a power above all human power, and that this power was merciful. His dominion is an eternal dominion, his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. He does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. No one can hold back his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" These words came not from a Hebrew prophet, not from a priest, not from a trained disciple. They came from the greatest pagan king of antiquity, spoken after 7 years of eating grass like an animal. At that same moment, the kingdom was restored. The advisors who had waited for him returned to serve. The nobles sought him out and reinstated him with even greater honor than before. Because God had not broken Nebuchadnezzar, he had shaped him. And the difference between breaking and shaping is the difference between an end and a beginning. What is broken has no further use. What is shaped becomes something far more precious than it was before passing through the painful process of transformation. Then Nebuchadnezzar did something extraordinary. He wrote and issued a decree to all peoples, nations, and languages of the earth. Not a war decree, not a demand for tribute, but a personal testimony of the sovereignty of the Most High God. The man who had ordered his name stamped on every brick of Babylon now engraved in papyrus and stone the greatness of the one who had humbled him. This decree is preserved in the book of Daniel, and has reached us more than 2,600 years later. Archaeologists found something curious in the cuneiform records of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar appears prominently in the documents from the beginning and end of his reign, but there are years of inexplicable silence in the middle. A strange absence for a king so prolific in recording his own deeds. Secular history, without realizing it, left exactly the gap that the Bible fills, a king mysteriously off the scene for years, followed by a return to power. The prophecy needs no validation, but it received one. What does this story tell us about pride? That it may be the most dangerous of all sins, not because it is the ugliest, but because it is the most invisible to the one who carries it. Nebuchadnezzar could clearly see arrogance in his enemies. But he could not see the tree growing inside himself. Pride has this cruel characteristic: the greater it is, the less its bearer can perceive it. It presents itself as clarity when it is actually blindness. And that is precisely where God must intervene. And God intervenes. Not with cruelty, with surgery. Nebuchadnezzar's humiliation was not divine vengeance, it was divine treatment. The same God who cut the tree preserved the stump. The same God who took away reason restored it. The same God who removed the king from his throne returned him to it. Because the goal was never destruction, it was transformation. The greatest king on earth needed to understand one simple truth: God is God. And we are creatures made in his image. And what about you? Is there any area of your life where pride has grown like that tree, tall, spreading wide, casting its shadow over everything around it, but blocking your connection to heaven? It might be in your career, your relationships, your achievements. That quiet certainty that you got here on your own, that you need no one, that your success belongs entirely to you. Nebuchadnezzar believed exactly the same thing. And God loved him far too much to let him die believing that lie. The same mercy that restored the most powerful king of antiquity is available to you today. You don't need to hit rock bottom before lifting your eyes to heaven, but if you're already there, know this: the stump is still in the ground. God has not discarded you. If this story stirred something inside you, share it with someone who needs to hear it right now. Subscribe to this channel. Every week we uncover a Bible story showing just how deep this ancient book truly goes. Until the next revelation.